Now, let me finish up because we've gone from definition. Let me just review. So definition to understanding to classifying and what I want to finish up with is just really the larger issue of labeling. And probably the easiest way I can communicate it to you is the social stigma involved. If for example, someone were to come up to you and say that they have been diagnosed as depressed, the question would be, what comes to your mind? Is it a negative perception of them as being weak or as being whatever the image or the thing that comes to your mind? This is one of the arguments against labeling people. And as we have seen, a label really does have a huge impact. I mean, if for some people, and I will say this from my own experience, for some people, it's a relief to know that what they have is known. And that's oftentimes what a label will do. But a lot of critics point out that labels can create preconceptions that bias our perceptions of people's past and present behavior and unfairly stigmatize them. And I will tell you from my own experience, I have real issues with diagnosis, not from the perspective of it shouldn't be done. I understand the practical value, if you will, of diagnosis. Practical. That's the hazard of talking and writing at the same time. You confuse words. So I understand the practical value of it, but the temptation to self-define, to self-define by the disorder is extremely strong. So instead of saying I'm a person who struggles with depression, we move from that to I am a depressed person. And that's the challenge of any kind of labeling or classifying that we do. Labels can become what we refer to as self-fulfilling prophecies. In other words, because I've been diagnosed as depressed, what happens is that I end up seeing all of my behavior within that context, and therefore oftentimes I will become more depressed. So essentially what I have done over the course of my career is that I will engage and do the diagnosis with people because of insurance purposes or other things. But once the diagnosis is done, that's really the last time we talk about that diagnosis. People are not their disorder. And I would suggest to you that even from a Christian worldview, we don't see people that way. We see people as choosing, and choices lead to certain behaviors. But we can divide people from their behavior. Their behavior is one thing, the value and worth of people are another. And so diagnostic labels are useful because they are a shorthand between mental health professionals, shorthand summaries of people that are being treated and how we're going about treating them. But the problem is, as I've said to you before, is that the nature of diagnosis is that it's a summary. And because it's a summary, I lose all detail about the person and the descriptive material, if you will, the descriptive information that makes them who they are. And so diagnosis is a double-edged sword. It is very useful for mental health workers. On the other hand, when we see people as a case rather than as people, we get into real problem. And so my bottom line for you is that diagnosis is as useful as the system dictates it to be, but people are not labels, and they are not their disorder. And because of that, then we have to be very careful and very clear about how we're using these things so that we can then get back to the very intimate and highly personal nature of interacting with people. And remember, even in counseling, which we'll talk about next week, is that somebody is not their disorder. I don't interact with the disorder. I interact with a person. I identify the issues that come up as a result of the choices that they have made. But when we talk about disorders and labeling, we have not only the choices people make, but as I said earlier, we have genetics that we have to contend with. We have the social context in which they are operating that I need to contend with. We have family backgrounds that are part of the backdrop of this person. We have their cultural backdrop that are part of this description. And there's nothing that we have that will ultimately capture all of these things. That's essentially what a therapist is to do, is to grasp the depth of the humanity of the person and interact with that rather than the diagnosis or the label that they might have.